Hello and welcome to Fueling Around with me, Jason Plato, and the knotweed in my foundations. It's Dave Vitty.
Fueling Around is powered by adrianflux. As the UK's largest specialist insurance broker, adrianflux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help save you money on your car, your bike, or even your home insurance.
Good advice, Dave. Now, don't forget to press subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss an episode, or press the follow button on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your pod things from. Anyway, Dave, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm excited today, like even more excited than normal. Because this is a brand new series and we're back, and they said it would never last. That's the first exciting thing. The second exciting thing is that we've got a very, very special guest here who we've been on the tail of for some time now, who is going to launch this new season.
He's been a bit of a bugger to get hold of, though, hasn't he?
He has, but it's...
In all honesty. We've been after him for 3 years, this chap. Anyway, our guest today is quite simply, in my opinion, TV royalty. Mm-hmm. He's been gracing our screens for the last 25 years, providing us with unmissable telly on a show which I think is fair to say is everybody's guilty pleasure. It is, of course, Mr. Grand Designs himself, Kevin McCloud. Kevin, how are you? Great to get you at last.
I'm really well, thank you, and thank you so much for that slightly abusive introduction.
I don't know if you think that's as abusive. We haven't got anywhere yet.
I'm very slow at answering emails, that's all I'll say.
Oh, do you know what? I know it's only a few months, but I thought I'd rev it up a bit.
Exactly.
It might actually be a year. It might be a year.
Yeah. It could well be a year, but do you know what? It doesn't really matter now, Kevin, because you are here and we're delighted. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have to say, right, first of all, I could spend 2 hours asking you a million questions about Grand Design, such as my relationship with the show over the past 2.5 decades. However...
We can do a test later.
We could do a test later, but that could be perceived as being self-indulgent in what is loosely a car podcast, right? So we're not going to talk Grand Design for the whole thing, but we are going to start off with the opening bit to talk about Grand Designs, because you've this year celebrated 25 years of the show. It's an extraordinary achievement for any format and any presenter. Yeah. When you compiled the clips for Grand Design's 25 years and counting, how did that process make you feel?
Well, it's like, you know, they say, just before you die, your whole life flashes before you, I watched that set. My great mate, Ned, he's a producer, and I've worked with him for over 25 years, and Ned directed and edited and put together that film, and he was merciless. He just kind of went back to the archive and dug out every odd clip of me wearing leather trousers or,
I love that.
With floppy hair or whatever, and or no hair. And actually, that's the extraordinary thing about watching. It's a bit like watching, time travel, because it's a piece to camera which he assembled out of like 30 clips over 25 years, and it makes a 30-second thing. Each clip's about a second or something like that. I'm just watching the hairline, just kind of slowly, just.
And that's funny, isn't it?
It's like watching a glacier, sped up.
I bet it's a bit strange, actually, looking back at the very early shows, because it's like 20 plus years. I bet that's a bit odd, eh?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of what being on television is odd. Full stop. So you sort of get used to seeing yourself, and you think, oh, am I? Should I? No, don't. And I end up, because I look at a lot of the cuts, as we're editing it, putting it together. By the time we get to transmission, I tend not to sit down with family and watch it. I tend not to sit down with family and watch it, actually, because I learned a long time ago that my family, like most families, they're watching the television while on their phone, while on their laptop, while talking to the dog, and then to each other, and then they 3/4 of the way through, and they look up and they say, What's his name, that bloke? It's like, just what are you doing? I've spent 8 years making this 1 hour of television. This is my life. And you say, what's his name 3/4 of the way through? So I've long since given up doing that.
So over 25 years, how many shows is that?
I don't know. I don't know how many. I mean, I must be about 200.
It's got to be, hasn't it? Wow.
Somebody added it up and said that if you wanted to watch it back to back, 24 hours a day, it would take 33 days.
Do you know what? I'm up for that, because I love it.
That could be the largest lost month of your life, though.
Well, no, because I love all that. I love all the trials and tribulations, and it's an amazing show. It's great.
When you look back at the earlier shows, and as I say, you do see that in the 25 Years and Counting show, which is available to watch on the Channel 4 player now. I was watching it the other night. It's also the fact that the early ones look so dated now, just in terms of the cameras, don't you think? You know, when you watch it, and we don't really sort of notice on a sort of yearly basis how sort of technology's got better with cameras and pictures and stuff like that. But when you look back to what I still consider to be fairly recent history, you know, your sort of 2005s and 6s and 7s, and you watch it, and it looks like a really dated piece of film.
Yeah, and you know, to end this current series, we've got a revisit to the very first project we ever filmed. And the couple are still there, still living in the house. And the amazing thing is all the trees have grown, and like the house is, instead of being in a field now, it's in a forest. And all the kids have grown up, and they're running the parents' hang gliding business. And it's all kind of, it's an amazing story because the house has sort of engendered this amazing kind of culture, you know.
Yeah.
And so I went out because I had to go back and do a voiceover for it. And I had to impersonate myself 25 years ago. And my voice was a bit high. And I learned the only way I could do this, right, in the studio, in front of the mic, was to smile, like grin, you know, like an idiot in front of the microphone, and lift my voice by half an octave and tilt my head to one side. So
No way.
And that way, I could produce the voice of me 25 years ago, and there was a kind of some strange, weird, artificial enthusiasm which emerged, and I went to see. It's like going to see the headmaster, but where we record this is in a place called Envy in Soho, and so I went upstairs to the top floor where the king of Envy, Bob, who is the sound mixer. He doesn't do the records because he's too grand for that. He's a mixer. But I've known Bob for almost as long as we've been making the series. He's a lovely, lovely man. And Bob can get rid of planes, and he can get rid of police sirens, and he can make you sound different. He can do all kinds of strange things with sound in the mix. And he's a genius, a wizard. And he said, Kevin, listen to this. And he played me a piece of commentary from the very first episode, from the finished film broadcast. And he said, listen to this. And he played a piece of commentary, and it was the sound of me talking over a shot of a windswept hill, and all you could hear was the sound of the wind on a microphone. They'd used the atmosphere, the sound, as a sort of backing track. And he said, I've only got the film. There are no split tracks. There are no rushes for this film. I have to live with this sound, and I don't know what to do. And so we had to re-record that piece of commentary over the thing. And what was really weird, though, and I'm coming to this point, is that no one in their right mind these days would use the wind noise on a microphone as a background noise for a shot. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like it was like we'd forgotten what we were supposed to do.
Here's a good question for you. How many of the original crew are still working on it to, current days? Is there a few, or?
Well, okay. So I got in at 3:00 this morning, having been to the pub last night with about 120 other people who have worked on the show for the past 25 years, and we've just sort of come to the end of this great big bean fest. Of the 25th, and for which we've done a book, and I've designed a commemorative tea towel, and I've always said, and at the end of it all, we're going to go to the pub, which is what we did last night. And it was amazing bumping into people. So there are people I hadn't seen for 25, 30 years, because we started filming in 97. And I'd forgotten even that they were around, and then suddenly they walk up to me, and some of them haven't changed at all, which is annoying. And an editor, Anne, just came up, and she edited our very first series, and I just said it was like literally she sprang out of my past. It was just fabulous.
How brilliant is that? Eh?
But it's a big family, because over the years, I think we counted it up. I think it's nearly 700 people have worked on the show.
Wow,
which is just nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
What I always enjoy and find particularly amusing is your face on the show when you're a bit unsure about something. Or you don't agree with their decisions.
The eyebrows do everything.
Well, with the greatest respect, you're not very good at hiding what you're thinking, which is one of the best bits, because it's got to be true, hasn't it?
I've done stuff with other people where you get a bit of a rapport, and the only rapport I can really get going is with the the viewer, I think, and and so the thing to do with viewers, and since we don't have to sell them anything, I can sort of suggest stuff, and I love it when I can sort of be ambiguous. So, you know, you see people tweeting afterwards, "Oh, Kevin didn't like that one," and I probably did actually. I just halfway through, I just kind of raised my eyebrows and looked a bit quizzical, and it's what's wonderful is being ambiguous. Is putting stuff out there that makes the viewers think. You know, that makes it. And sometimes I'll offer an opinion just for the sake of it, just to get people to say, "No, you're wrong." And because it's the hardest thing telly can do is get people to think, and it's a great thing when people react and respond and feel that their voice it matters, and it's like being in a club.
Yeah, Dave, did you see the one which was on recently, which was like it was an old, it was right by the seaside. I think it was in Essex somewhere, and it was a cantilevered.
Yes, with the guy who
with all the glass was the wrong spec, and he was basically flying by his pants. This guy, wasn't he? And you could see your face looking at it, thinking, just get some drawings done. But he pulled it off.
He did amazingly. It just took him about 7 years. But just to correct you there, Jason, it's in Northeast Yorkshire, which is just next door to Essex.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Not far from Essex.
Yeah,
East Coast.
That's it.
But no, it's that whole thing, Kevin, as you say, because you're trying to sort of convey, hopefully, the thoughts of people watching. That sort of slight, unsureness or whatever about what their designs are, and then as you say, with your eyebrows, you display that. I mean, a sort of fairly serious point, I suppose, is the success of the program. To me, shows no sign of waning, which I'm delighted about, and I'm sure you are as well. Do you think that's because there is no limits or boundaries to people's ideas and creativity? Therefore, no limits to the sort of projects in the pipeline, which will continue to be innovative and inspiring and aspirational. There really is there's no boundary, is there?
No, there isn't a boundary at all. And I the only boundaries are those of planning and building control. Boring. And the other thing, which sort of amplifies that, is that, and this is something I know that Richard Osman talked about in that The Rest Is Entertainment, and he says that the thing about grand designs is that there are beats it hit. You're going to see a CAD, you're going to see people dig a hole, that there's going to be maybe a divorce, but probably a house at the end of it, and that's it. So, and there are going to be some ad breaks in between. So what happens? How do you then kind of judge the adventure, as it were? And the adventure, you know when it goes wrong, because the adventure doesn't take 2 years, it takes 12. That's the first thing. So you look at the dates, and the time, the hairline and everything. And then the other thing is that I really love is the fact, although we know we're going to see a house of some kind, we don't know what the emotional adventure is going to be. And one thing I've learned is that I learned this in therapy, that love and hate are two very strong emotions, and anger too. But there are many, many others: anxiety, depression, loneliness, and sense of bewilderment, joy, hope, and there are, I think we cover them all. I think honestly, I mean, the seven deadly sins, the great virtues, they're all there. I think only murder is I think it's probably the only one that we haven't visited yet.
Well, you say that. They could be in the foundation somewhere, Kevin,
You never know.
Yeah.
So, have you ever found yourself kind of being a marriage guidance counsellor at times? Because it gets edgy, huh?
I think I try not to do the marriage counselling. I do the building thing, but it doesn't really matter what advice I give people because they don't listen anyway. So I just, I ask the view. You're right. You're absolutely right, Dave. I ask the questions that the viewers have in their head. That's if there's a responsibility, it's that, to ask the questions you think the viewers are thinking, and then to pursue some questions and and try and throw people off their guard a bit.
It was things like, again, just to give another example, and I think this just popped into my head. There was the one where, sorry, I don't want to go into too many specifics, but the one where, do you remember they built the tennis court outside before they'd actually got a load of fundamentals together, and then it was going to effectively be like a lorry park out there on this sort of tennis court, and you were just sort of thinking, surely that's the wrong way around. Surely you should be doing this or doing that or doing whatever. And the tennis court is a secondary or tertiary, project.
Yeah. Unless, of course, you are an ex-professional tennis player, which he was. He was an architect who'd been a professional tennis player. But you're right. Look, it's like the fact that everybody, you know, not everybody, a lot of people, a lot of younger people, they lay the eggs before they build the nest. You know, the baby comes along halfway through. So, human beings, one of the most fantastic sources of comedy for me is the fact that human beings have no sense of the absurd, really. In their own lives, and certainly no sense of priorities. You know, what's important?
If you could give our listeners one piece of advice for those who are thinking about embarking on this amazing journey of building a house, if you could, if you could kind of pull it down to one brilliant piece of advice, what would it be?
Be absolutely sure that you're not going to get divorced. In fact, do it as a single person.
There we go.
A single story, single person extension.
Do you know, everybody I talked to about this, I mean, yesterday I was filming finals before I went off to the party. And we were filming this wonderful, wonderful project with this couple who've just renovated, done a barn thing. And they were talking about the difficulties of working together and, you know, the stresses in the relationship. And nobody at the altar says, you know, to love and to cherish and to build a house together. Because nobody in their right mind would. And I honestly think it's not something you sign up for in a relationship. I think it stresses people beyond imagination, and you discover the areas of disagreement and of stress and tension and of dislike and why do that? Why? Yeah, Joel Golby, great journalist at The Guardian, wrote a beautiful little review of this series and of the 25 years, and he just said, I think the title of it was Grand Designs, watching people go through hell to end up with a house slightly nicer than yours.
But do you know what? I've actually just thought of a new TV concept actually between us, which we can perhaps patent and trademark, because you're aware of Married at First Sight, and just as going back to what you said before there, Kevin, which you know in many ways is completely the wrong thing. I would suggest to be doing. You know, is unlikely to last. And what people should do is they should maybe build a house. All couples should maybe go through a house build before they get married. So perhaps if you fuse together Married at First Sight with Grand Design, so you go on this whole process, and then at the end they get married, perhaps out by the water feature. You know.
Yeah, you find out if everyone's compatible or not.
You could marry them, right, with one of your signature sum-ups to a drone, right? And then the drone would then sort of go back off into the distance. You get this lovely shot of the happy couple and the bridal groom.
Yes, is it going to be topping out ceremony of joy, bliss and connubial perfection? Or this week, is it foundations of divorce? Yeah, I can see that.
I think probably the latter, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think foundations of divorce is the series.
Yeah, and there you go. Let's write that down.
Kevin, we could speak for hours, as Dave has mentioned. Yeah, we're big fans of the show, but we need to kind of seamlessly segue into, you know, and get to the salami of the sandwich and talk cars.
Okay, just throw the bread away. Let's just eat it.
Right,
straight there.
So, when you look at cars, do you look at them in a similar way you might look at a building in terms of its architecture, its style? Tell us a bit about your car journeys.
Yeah. So my dad was an engineer, and I grew up in an engineering household, and so we you know, as kids in the 60s and 70s, it was just like there was just everything. We just lived for things that moved. And my father worked in aircraft engineering and rocket engineering, so he was like super, you know, he was in the white heat of technology. He was testing rockets in Aylesbury, of all places, and at the there's a rocket research centre. I think it is. Which is now a kind of industrial estate. Yeah, and there's all these amazing rocket testing structures in concrete. That's where he worked for British Aircraft Corporation, and then and tested satellites, and then went off to French Guiana and Woomera in Australia to launch things and watch them blow up, 15 feet off the ground. As kids we were kind of I've just done a podcast with a mate of mine about Thunderbirds and about Jerry Anderson and about the 60s and about the whole. Yeah. So for me, architecture and design are both rooted together in the world of puppetry and that kind of mid-20th century optimism and the sort of innocence of that. And and absolutely. I mean, so if I look at a chair, which is a movable object after all and comfortable, and it makes you feel good. If I look at a chair, I almost make no distinction between the chair and the car. The house is a harder thing because it has to stay where it is and be contextual. But the car can move; it has the freedom to travel and add to that, the whole engineering thing of the beating heart of the engine and that Japanese Shinto idea that as you use a machine, it develops a soul, and that that to me it speaks purely of the internal combustion engine.
Can you recall the first car at a very young age which really rocked your boat?
That really rocked me. I had two cars, one of which was seeing the first Jaguar XJ6 in the village I grew up, which is the Mark 1, which had the bigger, lower grille, And the other was on a French exchange, I think aged 10, and a Matra Simca Bagheera drove past me, which looked like a Lotus, had 3 seats, which were tartan across the front. And that was it, just a 3-seater cabin. And it was fiberglass, it wasn't much cop. But it just looked like it was straight out of Space 1999, it was like a Jerry Anderson car. And I love that. And I've been in love with cars ever since. And the work of car designers. Yeah.
Kevin, I want to go back to the very beginning with you in a second, but just first of all, some mid-show housekeeping, if we can. If you haven't already, please press subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss an episode, or press the follow button on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. So, Kevin, passing your test, as we always think, is, a really significant moment in your life. It's a rite of passage for us all and a real milestone in terms of your freedom. Do you remember that day of the test centre, and do you remember how many attempts you'd had to actually get yourself there?
Of course, it's a journey of pain and shame. So my dad taught me to drive. Never had a lesson. He taught me to drive in a Wolseley 610. Big 3 litre thing. It weighed as much as a Chieftain tank, and a hugely underpowered thing. And then in an Austin Maxi, which actually, people are so rude about the Maxi. But he as an engineer, he just loved it. And it was purple and it had orange upholstery. It was a cool thing, the Maxi. And, people confuse it with the Allegro, but forget that. So I failed my first test in Luton because I managed to freewheel in neutral down a hill without my foot on the brake. So effectively entirely out of control. And,
out of control, yeah.
Completely
under
out
gravity.
Of control. I might as well have just taken my hands off the wheel and shut my eyes, And that was an instant fail. And so I didn't do that. So I took my test in Leighton Buzzard, which is completely flat. So I couldn't do that again.
Like that. You thought about that one.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, you I don't know if people still do this, but you could play, like you'd hear that Leighton Buzzard was a really, really, that they were really easy. Yeah. They get loads of passes that way. They're really soft touch.
But you know what? Sorry, just to interrupt you. Just even to this day now, actually, because I have this with my niece at the moment. You can still choose whatever test centre you want to take your test anywhere. And the reason why they do, and I kid you not, right? So we live in Buckinghamshire. She's got a test booked at the moment for somewhere in mid Wales because that's the closest place that she could get in sometime in the next 6 months. However, it also happens to be
because you can't get appointments. You can't get a booking.
But it also happens to be one of the highest pass rates in the country because it's this 2-bit little town. I don't think it even has any roundabouts or anything. So she's probably going to go in there. But you can
just say pleased to see you.
But sorry, Kevin, I interrupted
One
you.
set
So
of
you were
traffic
saying
lights
that
and 20 miles an hour.
You're in Leighton Buzzard because obviously it was flat. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. I think I had a girlfriend at a school in Dunstable at that point. And I just remember driving to Dunstable afterwards and parking outside her school and, with the elbow on the edge of the car and, Dad's Maxi. It was, I can't believe that actually that looked that cool, but it was a moment of glory. And the thing I really do remember is the sense of freedom, not having another human being in the car with me for the first time in my life. I was king of this realm and able to control this vehicle and feel good and adult. Because, at 17, you're not voting and you're not drinking. Well, that's not true.
Wow.
But
You're not voting.
at 17, I was working in a pub. But it was just, that sense of freedom was just fabulous, and I've loved and pursued that ever since.
It's quite a daunting feeling the first time you go out on your own, and it's brilliant though. It's great.
No, it's exciting. It's like nowadays I pursue it. I like driving cars built in the 1920s and 30s because they have no brakes and no steering. No steering. They have steering. They don't have any. They don't have any seat belts. And so there's you can sort of find that sense of rawness.
Yes.
In historic vehicles and driving old cars and bangers around that you just can't do in modern cars actually. And all my kids I've taught to drive in old Land Rovers in fields because I see. And in fact, I honestly think that most people, when they pass the test, really ought to be given a Series 2A Land Rover for the first year. That would really help us all.
Because everything after that must feel like an absolute breeze. If they're learning to drive one of those in a field, when they then get into their instructor's car, which will be whatever, it will be a Nissan Micra or something like that, it'll be an absolute doddle to drive. Yeah,
I think, and also you learn about control when, you can sort of, you feel the gears grind, and when you select low ratio by accident, or when you skid. And the first time most people skid is in an accident. Yeah. And if you drive around a wet field, then you soon learn, that actually you can play with skidding, and not that we should be telling children to do this, but these are all kind of, this is driving. It's the skill sets of driving.
So what was your first car that you bought?
So, I was working at Foster Menswear in Dunstable, and my dad rang me. He rang Foster Menswear because he was so excited being an engineer. And he said,
Did they have to tunnel you?
It wasn't that big a shop, frankly.
Mr. McCloud!
Jack
Come to
Trussell,
reception,
the manager.
please.
Jack Trussell, the manager. It was it's slightly larger than newsagents, right? So Jack Trussell, the manager, came out to me and said, "Your father's on the phone," and he was really cross because obviously he hated. I was just a schoolboy and just annoying, and so I picked up the phone, and Dad, I thought somebody had died because my dad never rang me anywhere at work, never got it. No, he wrote me one letter, as a father to me, telling me to stop messing around. And he said, "I bought a car for your birthday," and I think it had cost him 40 quid. And it was a three. Now you have to get this. You have to listen very carefully because to identify this vehicle, it was a Bond 875 three-wheeler. Now this is not the Bond
orange?
Bug. No, there's
not the Bond Bug.
Jason, classic mistake there. No, it's the
hands in the air.
The Bond Bug looked like it might have been designed by Marcello Gandini for his baby son, right? And my Bond three-wheeler, the 875, Hillman Imp engine, so I think it actually had the same engine in it, 875 engine, great little engine over the back axle. And it looked like a cross between a bumper car and a coffin. And it was dark green fiberglass. It was
handsome thing then.
Really handsome. When my dad said he bought it for my birthday, he actually bought it for his three sons because he thought it would be a thing we could all, and we did indeed, all of us drive it. I drove it for about 3 years. I went to university. Then my brother, he drove it. He managed to do great things with it, like turn it over into a ditch in the snow, and then climb out of it to discover that there were just three wheels in the snow. That was it. And then my youngest brother took a rotary saw to it and turned it into a convertible, which you could do, of course, with the fiberglass. The whole thing, it was an amazing car because you could take the front wheel, the spare wheel off the front wheel at the front, which is quite heavy, obviously, put it on the back seat, push the seat right back, the driver's seat, and you could do a wheelie down the road. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah.
So remind me of the model. It's a Bond what? 375? Did you say?
A Bond 875. 875 might have been called GT, I don't know, but that's
Oh,
irrelevant.
I can see it now. Oh, she's a beautiful looking thing, isn't she? I said classic.
You know those pale blue
Invalid carriages.
we used to call it invalid carriages, they were called.
Yes,
Yeah, they were
yes.
mobility vehicles in the 60s. It looked like a sort of slightly less handsome version of one of those.
I like the racy side window. It's got the side windows on an angle, isn't it? I like that.
Yeah. But the thing is, the two sliding side windows, you could not open both of them. If you opened both of them at the same time, the air pressure was such that the back window would pop out and disappear down the road.
Kevin, so that was the first one. Where does the car history go after that? Do we get to four wheels with car number 2?
Yeah. So I went off to university. I went to live abroad for a while. I didn't have a car for years, and I drove initially. I had one of those little Velocet bicycles, which was a black, Black Widow's bicycle with a little motor that you would drop onto the front wheel, and that it would drive the tyre. But mine had a slow puncture, so the tyre pressure would decrease, and so the speed would decrease. And I
wouldn't get any purchase.
So I taught English in this little bit, and I'd always get there for the class, but I'd never get home in the middle of the night because I'd have to sort of pedal very slowly. But that was the only vehicle I had for years, and then I got so this is cool. I got a Saab, right? Not a Saab 96. Which, of course, is the great rally, the Swedish rally success, that car with the V4 engine. I got the 95, which in bright orange, it's like fifth hand, and I was working in the theatre at the time designing, so I used to put props and stuff in the back. It was a good little, but it really did look like a 96, which somebody had converted at home into an estate. You know what I mean? The way that people used to, with some plywood. And that's exactly what it looked like. And then painted orange to make it look like it was a really proper car. It didn't look like a proper car. But that was my faithful steed for like 6 years.
See, it's really interesting that, because cars say a few things about people, and there's a couple of brands. The Saab is most definitely an architect or a designer's car.
Yes.
Or maybe a dentist. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
So that's interesting,
architects of the mouth. Yes.
Architects of the mouth. But no, you're right. It's kind of like a thinking man's car, isn't it? It's somebody who understands design. Because Saabs have always been slightly understated, haven't they? The sort of things, people that don't buy BMWs and don't buy Audis and don't buy Porsches, like the obvious things. And a Saab was always something. I think when you see someone drive a Saab, you kind of think they're interesting. And I mean that with the great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. When I
And
used
they
to
make
think
great cars.
I thought, if I drive a Saab, I'll look interesting. So I had
think that's a bit of bullshit.
I had one little accident in that car, and I was in the traffic in London on a hill, and as you do, you look out the window and you forget, and the car starts to move, and it sort of rolled very gently into the back of a Ford Cortina, and the Saab was phenomenal because, as you say, hugely well-made cars, and they were made out of really thick steel, and I thought, oh, my car, it's all damaged, and I reversed back up the hill, and I got out, and the front of my car was pristine. And there was this perfect, sharp Saab-shaped dent in the back of the Cortina. It's just like it was like it's like in a battle. The Cortina just crumpled. It was like tinfoil, just gave way, molded itself to the Saab.
What sort of period of your life was the Saab the main feature? How old were you?
Oh, 80. I was in my early 20s, so it was like 81 to 86. In fact, when I got married, for the first time, some friends, the Saab was the going away car, and some friends of mine very wittily made a little window screen sticker that said Saab and Mem Saab.
So what was the first car then, Kevin, where you sort of thought, you know what, perhaps not I've made it, but what was the first car you were really proud of, do you think, over the years? Was it the Saab, or was it something that came later, which was perhaps a sort of status symbol to an extent?
That's a really good question, and one of the so there are 2 or 3 cars I've had that I think I wish I hadn't sold that car, and one was and I've always, not always, but quite often had estates because I've always been in design and making, always needed kind of like
space.
Pickup trucks weren't really space. So I had a 240 Volvo in silver, GLT. The GLT with the kind of blacked out trim and beautiful black leather seats and a turbo, which made a sort of 2.3 litre engine sound like it was 5. And I loved that car. And then only last year I learnt that David Bowie, he owned a customized 2-door. He did one of those kind of a very American looking GLT. It was a 2-door coupe, with a hard top and And I kind of thought, maybe I shouldn't have got rid of it. And the other car that I just still look for was I think it was a 126 series S-Class Mercedes from 1982. So it was a 380 380 coupe. And it was the car, which I think I think a friend of mine said that when it was new, it was like in the 80s, it was like £120,000 in the 80s.
Wow!
So it was like it was a car. I think it was hugely expensive, and I may be dreaming this, but the point is that it had everything you'd want. And these, those great cars made by Merck in the 80s, which had all the big S classes, had all the tricks that became standard for everybody else. They had seatbelt handouts, which are still quite rare, and totally adjustable seats in every angle, or there's a little model on the door that you could play with that would kind of push the seatbelt forward and up and down and backwards and so on, and sunroof, and then all the kind of usual kind of tricks, the anti-lock brakes and all the rest of it, and an amazing driving position. It was like driving a sitting room around, and I saw one. I bought mine for $6,000, which I thought was a king's ransom. This was like the beginning of Grand Designs, actually, right?
Yeah.
And I think I bought it for $6,000, and I think I sold it for 5,800 or something, like 4 years later. And I just couldn't believe the quality of that car. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, these were the ones that were designed by Bruno Sacca, weren't they? Who did those cars at that time? Who's just died recently.
Did it have pillarless?
Yeah.
Glass rear windows,
I'm a sucker for a pillarless coupe. Yeah. So I've now got in storage. Well, I've got to do a bit of work on it. It's perfectly drivable, but I just want to do a bit of work on it. I've got a Jag XJ6 coupe because it's pillarless. And I think it was Jay Leno said that it's the most beautiful car in the world when the windows are down. Because you just have this beautiful shaped opening in the side of the... which is... They're down quite a lot of the time because you can't actuate the motors to wind them back up again,
Isn't it weird? There's some crucial little bits of design on cars over the years, like the pillarless glass. But I always remember Volvo were the first people that made a pillarless, with no surround, interior mirror. So it just looked like a floating piece of glass.
Oh,
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that was
yes, you're right.
You get in the car and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. Isn't it weird?
Yeah. And like now you get in a car and it looks like it's been designed by a jeweler, for some, potentate. And it's all so super bling. And none of it's surprising. I mean, I got into a new BMW the other day, an electric BMW, which we've been using as a prop to drive. And I honestly thought there's a pattern on the dashboard, it was like a kind of resting pattern because they could do it because it was like massive LED screen. And I honestly thought the screen had broken, because it's like a pattern you get on your... It was like shards of broken glass. And I thought this is just nonsense. It's turned into a sort of infantile sort of parade of nonsense. And that's where sort of car design, I fear, is kind of going.
Well, do you know what? On that subject, Kevin, and I was going to ask you about this a little later, but while we brought it up now, let's mention it now. For somebody who obviously appreciates great design and classic design and beauty in objects, where are you with electric cars? Obviously you like your traditional cars and the classics, but could you ever see yourself in one, living with one, appreciating one?
I did, for a very brief moment, race... in a very light way, compete in the early days of Tesla when they were working out of a showroom in London and nobody had heard of them. And they took a Lotus and stuck 5,000...
The Elise, what was it?
Yeah, little tiny thing. And they stuck 5,000, Duracell batteries in it. And that was their first electric cars. And I did these sort of endurance things in that. And this is like 20 years ago. And Don Cochrane, who was then, doing marketing for Tesla UK, who's now a wonderful watchmaker. We got to know each other really well and did loads of silly stuff. So my point being that, I'm an early adopter, and I've done this, heating technologies and silly, weird photovoltaic hybrid thermal tech. And the trouble about early adoption is that there's no phone number on the box when it goes wrong.
It goes wrong. Good
because
call.
the people who made it have gone bust, and the people who were meant to service it have vanished. And it was all on a wing and a promise, and then nothing. So I've learned and been burnt a few times. I've had 2 BMW i3s.
Okay.
And the first thing I say about the i3 is, I know it looks like a small toad, but the technologically really fabulous car, really interesting.
For cities, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And they actually reinvented hybrid, because they said, actually, well, let's try and be principally electric, and let's use a tiny little petrol engine in the boot to help you along. And I love the fact that the interior was all done with recycled wool from organic free range sheep and
A bamboo plant or something.
That's it. Well, all the black stuff was done. All the rigid panels were done with hemp fiber and bioresin. Yeah. So they really, really tried and explored. And I thought that was kind of the future. And then actually what's happened instead is just everybody's now making massive cars with big electric batteries, which have to be even bigger because the cars are so massive. Yeah. So the whole idea of that efficiency kind of pursuit, that Lotus principle, if you like, that talking of Lotuses. So I think that's sort of gone by the way. And I've driven a lot of electric cars and love them, and I still drive them. So I'm a fan. The one thing I will say is, having driven a lot of them, a lot of different manufacturers' cars, is that dare I say this? They're all the same.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all the same.
Kevin, it's funny you should say that, because we had this same discussion with George Clark, who's obviously also in the architectural world and in the Channel 4 stable and whatnot. And we were talking about the fact that with a lot of these new electric cars that have come out now, especially the SUVs, without the badge, you wouldn't know one from another. Whether it was a Bentley or with an Audi or as a VW, they are all essentially the same box. And it is incredible when you look at them. Unless you recognize that badge, you'd have no idea what it is.
Yeah. But this is the inevitable conclusion to a process of homogenization in car design that's been happening for 30 years. So now you get into I actually don't know. If I get into a small car, I can't tell what it is. You have to look at the logo on the steering wheel to understand what the car is. You have to read the logo at the back. If you didn't have a logo on pretty well any modern car, you would not know what it was.
Struggle, because they've all arrived at the right shape for aerodynamics and all the rest of it. And it's all going in one direction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to make an important point. This is a bit of a moan, right? There's an exception to this, is that the one good thing about homogenization of car design through the 80s and 90s is that, generally speaking, the indicator always ended up in the same place, and the lights ended up they were in one or two places, right? Either there or they were there, down there on the right-hand side. And the gears were all pretty well the same. There was a way in which you could climb into any car and you knew how to drive it. And then the electric car came along. It's like,
Did I get the fish?
I was in this car the other day, and I had a panic attack because I couldn't get out of it. There was no door handle on the door, and when I was filming, and they were filming me getting out of the car, and I swear to God they can't use the shot because it's me just with my hand flapping it around, going, "Where's the handle? Where's the handle?" And I'm stuck in this thing, and it turns out there's a tiny button. There's a tiny button. And it's not even marked, and there's got to be some kind of safety issue around that, So my problem here is that with the advent of electric cars, there's a sort of consensus that, hey guys, it's a free-for-all now. We can go back to designing crazy interiors with weird designs and really odd buttons to do stupid things, and it doesn't make any sense. For example, right now, here's something highly intuitive. If you've got a forward and a backward, lever. You got a little button in your electric car.
Yes.
Most of them have got this. It's just got some kind of lever, and so you'd think press forward to go forward and pull back to go backwards. It's nearly always the other way around.
Is
The other way
it?
around, yeah.
I think that's just
So
plain
it's backwards
stupid.
to go forwards and...
Forwards, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's strange, isn't it?
So I've got an electric car. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I've got an electric car, where I have to imagine that the switch, which is in front of me, is actually on the roof. And if I think it's on the roof, like in an aeroplane, I can get it
You can
right.
get it right.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
I try to do a 3-point turn in the road, right? And an idiot watches me stop and then go to reverse and then drive into the lamppost
Drive
in
into
front
the
of me
bush.
instead. Yeah. It's just stupid.
Porsche did that years ago when they first did like a semi-automatic gearbox, and they had push forward on the gear lever.
Yeah.
Instead of going down change,
Yeah.
it went up change.
Oh,
Right.
that's
It
really
was a
confusing.
nightmare because it felt totally
Yeah.
polar opposite as it should do. And a year later, they changed it.
I have got
Weird, eh?
I've got a 1932 car,
Right.
which is called a Marandaz Special, and unsurprisingly for cars of that period, the gearbox is always a bit unusual, and my gearbox is backwards. So first is top right, second is bottom right.
Oh, really?
So I can work that gearbox without thinking. It is easier to operate that manual gearbox than it is to operate most electric cars' switches between
That's
forward
interesting,
and
isn't it?
backwards.
Yeah.
That's what I found.
So, Kevin, we know that you have an electric car in your stable. What else is part of the current McCloud fleet then? What's, because I think that your car or your car says a lot about you. So I think we can profile you a little bit by your garage.
Well, I have one or two runners and a large number of cars in bits because I, like my dad, I like putting stuff together and taking it apart and then leaving it apart, usually in a pile. But I've got quite a lot of projects that I intend to do over the next 20 years. I've piled them up, and I now actually have to sell stuff to pay for doing up the rest of it. But these are problems I face, right? They're not. They're personal. So if I were to point to the cars that I'm particularly attached to, I would say I've got this 1932 Marandaz Special, which was made right at the end of the Marandaz's life as a business, and it's got an American Continental engine in it, very lazy straight six. It's beautiful. It's a tourer. I've been around Europe in it with my kids. It's just, it's a beautiful low thing. It looks like a tiny Bentley. It's just my favourite thing. And then I've got a 1921 Lancia, which is currently having its engines very slowly rebuilt.
Right.
You know how people are, and in that world. It's like you think, the car's 100 years old, in which case I'll take 70 to just rebuild it. Never mind that Kevin is 65 and wants to drive it before he dies. So
It's because all the mechanics are ancient because they know how to work on them, isn't it?
yeah, it's true, and also because there are no bits. So this car, I think there are two. There's one I bought it for nothing, right? Because it looks really weird, and mine's been it was customized in the 90s, but actually originally it was a sort of Landau, and I bought it because it was just unusual. It's called a Die Kappa, and they only didn't make many because the Lambda that Vincenzo Lancia produced in 1922 was so dynamically, in terms of engineering, so advanced of anything else in the market. It was the most extraordinary vehicle. And it was kind of it had a kind of, semi-chassis. It was kind of semi-monocoque. It was amazing. So he built this thing, and it was a huge success. And he sold tens of thousands, whereas the one that came before, he sold about 60. And so there aren't that many left, and I've got one, and I think there's another one in Italy. So and I'm sort of itching to kind of drive that and understand what it is, and to also go on the adventure of kind of reinterpreting the body and so on. So there's one car that my kids love, and I don't think I could ever sell, and they all love driving it, and I love driving it, and it is a Fiat Dino.
Ah, yes.
From 1967, and it results from that very famous collaboration between Ferrari and Fiat in order to meet Formula 2 homologation standards.
Yeah. The quote.
It's a weird story.
Has it got a V6 Ferrari engine in it?
It's got a V6 Ferrari engine in it, built by Fiat, right?
Yes.
All the engines were built by Fiat. And the early ones were aluminium, mine's aluminium, and it was a 2-litre and V6. And the second version was a iron block, and that was 2.4. So they're heavier, but they're also more powerful. So there are people who have different arguments about which one's better. But anyway, who cares? So I got this open top car, and it's beautiful, and the body's by Pininfarina, which is just exquisite. It's quite similar to the Triumph Stag, but it's got more rounded shapes over the wheels. There's a kind of bit of E-type in there. I love the sound of it. You can be herring round country lanes. It sounds like a Ferrari. It is a Ferrari engine, and you're looking down and you're doing 35 miles an hour, and you're having the time of your life. So it's just a beautiful little tiny thing, and I've now repainted it, and it again, we've driven everywhere in that, and it's a sort of family. Wow. It's a sort of family. Like an kids, heirloom. They wouldn't speak to me if I ever got rid of that car. So there you go.
So actually, this question I'm going to ask you, maybe this is the car. So out of all the cars you've owned, if you had to pick one, and only one, and live with it for the rest of your life, what would it be?
As I approach my dotage, I kind of still hanker for the SEC, the Merc. That's the most sensible choice because it's got a sunroof. And it's got the seatbelt handout, so you don't actually break a rib trying to reach for the seatbelt.
And it's bomb-proof.
It's bomb-proof. As an old man, I wouldn't be able to park it, obviously, but as a really old man, I think I could still drive that. Environmentally, probably catastrophic. But actually, the environmental arguments about electric or petrol and about car use are really complex. And they are about usage, about mileage, about how far you commute to work, about how you charge, where your electricity comes from, whether you've got solar, whether you've actually converted an old car, a new car, how long you've had a car, whether or not it's actually was made in 1940 and you're still driving it, in which case the embodied energy, it gives you lots of brownie points. And it's a huge area of discussion, and it's as complex as talking about historic buildings and the environment. So I think the answer is to not drive very much and to drive something which is beautiful and gives you great joy and which people love. And I've noticed this driving through Europe in old bangers, like really old cars, and I've noticed this driving in posh new cars as well. Often people, when they see a brand new car, kids might like looking at some kind of posh Italian thing, but often people are a little suspicious. They don't. The idea of the ostentation, the wealth, that it can put people off. But one thing I've discovered: if you drive a 1925 car through a French village or down a high street, everybody loves it. Yeah, and it's a fantastic conversation starter. I can't really pick one. That's the trouble. But I think I'd have to boil it down between the Marandaz, which is full of memories, the Dino, which is full of memories, and the SEC.
Or the SEC.
Wow, do you know what? It's a lovely place to be, isn't it? To be sort of shortlisting those kind of beautiful machines, which links us onto our final question, Mr. Kevin McCloud. And this is something that we ask all of our guests. Jason and I always think that music and cars go well together. So we need your fantasy drive, please. Where are you? Where are you going? What are you listening to? And most importantly, what are you driving?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I also listen to a lot of music. And I think I'd have to sort of combine my love of 70s funk, with my love of vintage cars and my love of Italy. And I did actually get the Marandaz to Italy 5 years ago, and I want to recreate that. To drive through Italy in a car built. Okay, so I'm going to say this. It's going to be a rebuilt, sports-bodied 1921 Lancia Dappa, which is the car that I've got in bits. And I'm driving it through Italy on my way to Pienza to have lunch. And I'm listening to the Doobie Brothers or Earth, Wind and Fire.
Oh, yes, please. Hey? That sounds like a wonderful trip.
Doesn't it sound like a wonderful trip? JP, with you and me there at the end with a couple of cold gin and tonics, sort of toasting Kevin's arrival as he comes round the corner.
Absolutely.
You know, it's almost dreamy. And I think in that beautiful image, Jason, you need to take us out.
Let me get that image in my head. It's a great image, isn't it? Anyway, that is it for this week's Fueling Around, powered by adrianflux. As the UK's largest specialist insurance broker, adrianflux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help you save your money on your car, your bike, or even your home insurance. Dave, big thanks to you, but always a huge thanks to our special guest this week, the one and only Mr. Kevin McCloud, with a wonderful little collection of fantastic old bangers.
Kevin, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on. Don't forget to press subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss an episode, or press the follow button on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Ta-da.